So if you've been attending the diff for a few weeks now, you might have heard a thing or two about this thing called the circular economy. It can be a pretty tricky concept to get your head around, and one way to make that easier might be to turn it into a game. Today, we're talking to two people who have done just that. Welcome back to the 2016 Disruptive Innovation Festival. And if you're tuning in for the first time, then where have you been? We've been broadcasting for 2 weeks. We've just on day one of the third and final week of the diff, the online event for makers, learners, thinkers and doers. And today we're looking at the circular economy. So we're talking about taking a complex systems change for the global economy and turning it into a concept that can be conveyed using counters and dice. So today we'll be speaking with two guests in the studio and asking whether we can really improve our understanding of the circular economy through games or whether that's just a trivial pursuit. And I promise you that will be my last board game joke of the day. But guess who we've got in the studio with us today? It's Katie Whelan, founder of In the Loop Games. Katie, nice to have you with us.
Nice to see you, Joe.
And on the line we've got Frederick Van Meegeren, an industrial designer and board game developer for ResCon, which we'll find out a bit more about what that is later on in the session. A couple of things just before we get started here and start finding out about how the circular economy and our understanding of the circular economy has been gamified. We do want your questions and comments throughout this session. So if you've got questions about the circular economy and specifically about how we can improve our understanding through games, then fire them away. There's two main ways you can do that. If you don't know them by now, then here they are. Firstly, #ThinkDiff on Twitter, and we'll have some of my glamorous assistants picking those out and sending them to me. Also on the comments section, you'll find it just below the live stream that you're watching this in now. So don't forget, we've got 45 minutes. Don't forget to send your questions in throughout so we can put them to our two expert guests. The second thing I wanted to mention, seeing as we are talking about games and gaming the circular economy, I have come up with a game of my own today. Circular economy is a relatively new idea to some, and it can be quite complex to get our head around. So my game is completely original, not based on any games you would see on any high street shelves. Katie and I are going to play this today. This is the ceramic pot of knowledge. And inside are some circular economy terms. And throughout this session, we'll pick out at random, completely random, some terms, and I will describe them without using the words on the card. And Katie has to guess what they are. We'll do it a few times throughout the session, just a bit of fun. You've got me into the spirit of gaming and the circular economy. And I will go first to demonstrate how it's done. So I'm going to randomly, very random, you see, pick out this term here. Okay, Katie, are you ready for this?
Well, I don't have my PhD just yet, so hopefully I can get this right.
Okay, I'm going to try and describe this without using the terms on the paper. So this is a term for a systemic shift from a type of economy that's like a straight line to one that is regenerative. I'm talking about a new model that's regenerative by design, in which products and components are designed to be fed back into the system, and it's powered by renewable energy.
What is circular economy?
Perfect. Katie gets the game brilliantly. So we'll come back to that fascinating game a bit later on in the session. But firstly, Katie, you've spent longer working on gaming the circular economy, and you have In the Loop in front of us in the Diff studio today. Do you want to tell us a bit about how the game came about? We're going to do a dummy hand in a few moments, but Can you give us a bit of the context, a bit of the history so far?
Definitely. So I was working on my master's thesis at Delft University in the Netherlands, and I was researching the topic of critical raw materials which is an issue closely related to resource scarcity and price volatility of materials. And I was working with David Peck, who is a professor there, and he's located in industrial design engineering and also architecture faculty. And we were discussing how the topic of critical raw materials and circular economy, which is a solution space for addressing this issue of resource scarcity, it's quite difficult to understand. There's lots of different facets to it. And we were looking for a way to make it fun and engaging for others to understand how resource consumption, world events, and how the two relate to each other. And In the Loop was the first go at bringing this to life.
Do you think is it the first, are there other circular economy board games out there, or do you think this is a world first?
I think this was a world first in terms of putting this on paper and then also production.
And just remind us, so how long has this been in production?
I graduated in 2013, and this first manufactured set was actually produced only 2 summers ago, so August 2015 is when I raised the money for this. And
you talk about raising the money, you funded this through Kickstarter?
Yes, that's correct.
And can you tell us a little bit about how you found that process? Was it were people biting your hand off to contribute to In the Loop?
Well, yeah, it was a really great experience. I had been working on this game when I had finished my graduation project in 2013, as I said, and then I had been sort of dabbling around with it, bringing it to different places, using it at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation at different events, and as well as a circular economy. And then I was saying, I really need to stop cutting cards myself. I need to stop doing hand cut things. I need to bring this into production. And then decided to do the Kickstarter to see if the people who had been playing it wanted to actually put their money where the mouth was, I guess, in terms of getting it produced. So. And
who? I mean, you've said you'd road tested it a bit with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I think I was there for one of those sessions. What sort of other people were playing it? I mean, we were talking about this beforehand, but is this the sort of board game that you'd get out at Christmas time and get the family around, or is it a different sort of audience?
Well, I've seen that there are sort of at least 2 audiences. So we have people who are in higher education and they want to use this, or we have people where they want to use it with their students, for example, master students. And we also have people who want to use it as an icebreaker for different professional settings. And now I've seen the rise of a third group, which is just recreational hobby gamers who have an interest in just trying out lots of different games. So I went to an event actually in September of this year. It was my first time going to a hobby gaming event to see what they thought of it. And it was really interesting. They were really excited. So it has multiple uses and it can be adapted to depending to your situation.
I guess it wouldn't be the first popular game that involved using resources. I mean, Settlers of Catan, people are very familiar with. I mean, are there commonalities between this game and some games that people might see on the high street?
Yeah, I think there definitely are. Settlers of Catan was sort of a first inspiration for this because in the game you have to collect materials. Another example of games that sort of address societal issues would be Power Grid. So this is a game. I haven't played it yet. It's been on my table and I have to play it soon, but that has to deal with energy. So that's addressing something that's not really embedded in my game as it currently is. So you have to make decisions about how you're going to invest in energy and what types of energy. So there are definitely some similarities, and maybe it will be in the high street at some point. We don't know.
Well, to get people excited for that, can you show us a bit how your average hand might work in the game? Definitely.
So it is a turn-based game, and you can play by yourself or in a team of 2, for example. And usually I like to play with 4 to 6 players at the table. And so in the game, you're a product-producing company, and your objective is to collect 7 progress points in order to future-proof your company. So that's really the objective. So you're trying to get to 7, which is the lucky number. And in order to collect progress points, you can produce products, which gives you +2 progress points, or you can play certain strategy cards, which gives you +1 progress point. So that's a little bit about what you're working toward.
Okay.
And then, as I said, it's a turn-based game. So in your turn, you have a number of actions, 3 actions that you can do. So you can move around the board to collect materials. You can mine materials, or you can produce products, but you have to have the materials that are in your product in order to produce your product. So, for example, to give you an idea of some of the products that you could be producing, for example, a power tool. So it lists the number of materials that you need. So 1 antimony, for example, 1 tungsten, and 1 cobalt to produce this. So you need to collect these materials. And that might seem straightforward, but every 5 minutes or so in the game, and it is in real time, there is a new event. So this either helps or hinders you in collecting materials and producing products. So for example, an event could be a price increase. So emerging markets' demand for electronics have increased mining costs by 100 for platinum group metals, rare earth elements, tungsten, and cobalt. So these now are higher. So in order to combat that, you have different strategies that you could do. And this is where the circular economy concepts, remanufacturing, repair, recycling, this is where that comes into play. So as I said, there's different actions you can take on your turn.
And that aspect of pulling out these events, that's meant to reflect doing business in the 21st century, I guess. We hear that businesses that operate in a linear fashion, so they buy materials, make them into things, and chuck them away again, might be more exposed to external price fluctuations or other resource shocks than some that have taken some of these circular economy strategies?
Exactly. And what you see really, the game sort of changes or shifts perspective halfway through. So in the beginning, everyone's trying to just visit the mines to extract materials. And then once they're producing products, they go to the junkyard. And then if you have certain strategies, you're allowed to take materials from the junkyard or even evade the junkyard in the first place.
Okay. Could you win it by just pursuing a mine it and sell it cheap approach?
In earlier versions, it was definitely possible, and it still is possible. I've kind of built in a little bit of ways against that. Through some of the strategy cards, you can actually earn negative progress points. One example would be sweatshop labor. So then if you produce a product under specific conditions, then you would actually lose a progress point.
Okay.
So there is a little bit of some ethical thinking, I guess, in there.
And you said your kind of target group initially was around professionals and students as well. I assume you've tested it quite widely by now after a few years working on it. How has the feedback been from testing it with these different groups?
They really have enjoyed it. Even people who really aren't into games have been quite enthusiastic about it. And the first reaction a lot of times is that they want to play again. Okay. So maybe because you have to sort of play it, you play it once and then you really understand and you want to be able to try out different strategies afterward. So we have a clip. I don't know if this is...
we have a clip that we could play of some feedback?
Yeah.
Let's look at this now.
We're at the University of Limerick and we're here for the E-Waste Academy for scientists.
It's great to bring together students from different backgrounds that are all interested in this common theme of electronic waste to try to find solutions, share best practices, share research, just expose themselves to the wider perspective on e-waste.
I think the purpose of the Academy is really to bring together a talented group of young researchers from around the globe. The social scientists, we have the engineers.
So we're going to play In the Loop, which is the game that was my master's thesis at TU Delft. And now it's your turn to navigate the challenges that we face today and tomorrow in terms of materials. Is there anyone else who doesn't want to play? Okay, great.
The game is a perfect icebreaker for a start because
You really want to win, and that's
It was great. Coming from a business school, I'd see myself using this into a classroom.
As an educator, I think it's a great game.
Brings people out of their discipline into the broader area.
I was really impressed by the game, I have to say.
You get to play, you get to experiment, you get to trade.
Very strategically interesting, very societally relevant also, with lots of practical examples, and fun to play, fun to compete.
Learn how to use the resources you have in the limited quantity in terms of the material or the funding.
I think it's a good sort of starting place for a lot of conversations.
It forces people to come out of just their own discipline.
I really like the game. It gives you a good idea about how decisions can be made and how businesses develop.
Gives them a bit the bigger picture.
It started people talking about it.
It's a very nice and simple way to show us how the real world is working in terms of rare element and product consumption and product manufacturing.
Start playing it, and it is fun. That's the good thing about it. And you develop ideas.
I would definitely want to use it as an in-class active participation activity. Gets the students engaged, comfortable. It's a great icebreaker.
We had the theme of criticality, commonality, and circularity, and this was like really the perfect game for this because it's in the loop about critical raw materials, so it really fit well.
So that was some footage from an event that you tested in the loop at. Before we take a quick break and look at some other things going on at the diff, can you just reiterate for us, what is the importance of games in learning, in getting to grips with a complex subject like this? I think many people watching might think, well, it's a nice thing to do to have a game, which is a social activity, have some fun, but really, couldn't you just ask someone to watch a video or watch a presentation and they'd get the key information that they needed?
That's a good question. The one question that sort of relates to that I get a lot is, why haven't I created an online version of this game as well? And the reason I think that watching a video or having an online game is great, but that this sort of type of game really works well is that it stimulates face-to-face discussion about the topic. So one of the best experiences for me is when you have different people from different backgrounds around the table and something happens, for example, a world event happens, and someone says, this could never happen in real life. And then someone, because of their different experience, says, actually, and then gives an example of when a similar situation has occurred in history or what someone's forecasting for the future. And for me, you would lose that if you potentially just had it as an online one-player game or if you watched a video. So bringing together the real life experience and having the interaction is, for me, why board games are quite interesting.
Great. Well, we're going to speak with Frederick Van Meegeren in a couple of minutes, but I just want to bring your attention to a few other things going on at the diff. As you know, it's a 3-week-long festival of innovation, and here to tell you more about things that are coming up or things you might have missed is Julia Voll.
Hi, thanks, Joe. Well, if you're interested in circular economy and technology and innovation, then on Wednesday we have a treat for you, as Douglas Rushkoff is going to join us and talk with our own Ashima about innovation, technology, and the relationship between that and society, jobs and marketplace. And so please join us on Wednesday and ask your questions, share it with other people who might be interested. We're looking forward to that. And from that session to something that you might have missed, but you definitely shouldn't, it's the session about how the designers can change the future, together with Chris Grantham from IDEO, talking about design for circular economy and the different tools that designers can now incorporate in their work to account for circularity in the long term. And If you want to follow up and catch up on all the different sessions, you can on Catch Up Now on the website. Until the end of the week, all the sessions are available for watching. But if you want to watch afterwards, all you need to do is to set up a MyDiff account. You go, you click on it, it's for free. It gives you access to all the Diff accounts throughout all of December, so good Christmas watching. And we're looking forward for you doing that. And I actually have a question for Katie. I think it's really interesting what you're doing with this game. How do you ensure that this is going beyond resource efficiency into really emphasizing the bigger picture that is so important for the circular economy?
Thanks, Julia. There's a question. How do you ensure this goes bigger picture than just what's on the board, I guess?
Well, I think one of the things that I really try to do, especially and encourage others to do, is to, after playing the game, to really have a thorough summary and reflection session, because you want to make sure that people are having the correct takeaways from the game. It's great to let people experience how we deal with resources and how you auction and bid over materials and how. But yeah, you need to make sure that they're having the correct takeaways from it. And what I like to do is give examples of the different strategies that they see in the game. So for example, product remanufacturing. I like to tie in different case studies that relate to that and to the real world. So I hope I've answered your question.
You certainly have. To someone we can speak to a bit more about this, perhaps this bigger picture element as well, is Frederick Van Meegeren, who's joining us on the line from TU Delft, I believe.
Yes.
Frederick's an industrial designer, and you've been working on board games for ResCom, haven't you?
Yes, I've been actually also been working, just as Katie, been working at the TU Delft while graduating, but not as my graduation project, on a board game related to the circular economy.
Just so people know, what is ResCom, as we mentioned in your bio at the start?
ResCom is a consortium of different companies that have come together to basically think of strategies on how we can implement the circular economy. And they do that in several different ways. And one of these ways is through a serious game, because also, as been mentioned before, serious games can have a really good impact on people. It can be a really good way of experiencing these quite broad and complex subjects.
So you're here to prove that Katie doesn't have the monopoly on circular economy games. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how your one works? Because I understand it's slightly different.
Yes. So basically, what In the Loop focuses on is critical raw materials and resource management. And my own game took a step back and basically looked at, okay, what if there's non-designers who also want to understand action with resources or those materials? What do you tell those people in order to kind of convince them of the benefits? So instead, my game looks at the business models behind circular economy. I actually gave myself the challenge, what if we take away the whole sustainability aspect? Can it still be beneficial? Circular economy, and I looked at a circular business model, an access model, which is when a company basically gives you, leases you a product and you don't own it, and on the other side, an ownership model, where you as a consumer do own it. And I put players in, I give players both business models as an option, and kind of see how that plays out.
So yours focuses on the business models. We're not talking specifically necessarily about product design or materials maybe, but you're looking at business models and access and ownership. Are those the only two business models that we'll find in a circular economy?
Definitely not. There's several business models that you can think of, and there's also many that people haven't thought of yet. But in my game, I decided to I needed some kind of way to represent the circular economy. That is why I chose an access model, because it's so different than what we're used to in an ownership model. Ownership, with that I mean kind of a linear model. And access, you can really experience the circle in the sense that products almost from a company warehouse to your home and back to a company warehouse. So I felt that represented the circular economy quite well. But there's many more. There's a long life model where you focus on making products more durable. There's the performance model where you basically offer the benefits and not necessarily the product itself. So there's definitely several options there.
And when we talk about it, so yours looks at access models. So we're thinking about this access over ownership, paying for the performance of a product or a service rather than owning it outright. How did you make it so it wasn't obvious to the players that just choosing that option means they win the game? Because I can picture if some of these games, whether they're as icebreakers or learning tools, if they're a bit heavy-handed or a bit simplistic, then it could undermine the point, really.
Yeah, so actually the interesting way I developed this game, because I was working on a circular economy product and I wanted to understand what the circular economy was about. So I was thinking about how to understand it, and with that I started to model it using a Monopoly game. I started to model that to kind of closer represent the circular economy as I understood it. So because of that, I also had to model within that currently companies are still choosing for a linear model. So basically from that, already within those rules grew a strategy that companies are currently taking and apparently for now preferring over an access model. And that was what the ownership model became in this game. So actually, to explain a bit more about the game itself, the game is about filling a house with products. You have to get 12 products to fill the house, and the team that fills the house the first wins the game. And you can, one of the things I did that's different from the Monopoly game that I started with is in the Monopoly game, you buy a product and you kind of exploit it endlessly. And in my game, products break down. So the strategy of ownership is still there, and it's a quick, in terms of a business model, you can quickly earn some money from it. But because I've introduced the breaking down of products, in the long term, access might be a better option. At the same time, products might not break down. That's also incorporated in my game, and therefore, be a winning strategy.
Thank you, Frederick. We are going to come back to you in just a moment, but I'd almost forgotten about my own game that I've been developing for the past 25 minutes, and I've actually come up with a name for it now, Articu-Circulate, which I think is genius, really. Katie, would you like to take something from the Articu-Circulate box?
I would, but maybe I can say one
of course.
Quick thing.
Yes.
No, because I think one of the things that I was sitting here and Friedrich and I talked about his game and my game before, and one of the things that I see is that, yes, circular economy is a complex topic and it's difficult to articulate, but perhaps even in what we're seeing now in different types of games, we see a rise of different types of games. So for example, In the Loop really looks at why should we have a circular economy? And now Friedrich's game details specifically access versus ownership models. I'm working on a different game that's more about the financial bookkeeping.
Do you have a second game in the works already?
Well, that's it's part of a consortium through the EIT Raw Materials KIC. And so Wuppertal Institute, VITO, VTT, and TU Delft, and myself working on that. So yeah, and there's other types of games that have been being worked on right
So there
now.
could be, so your point is that there could be a whole host of games that in isolation might not give the whole picture, but are different avenues into that initial discussion.
Exactly, and they complement each other even, so.
And obviously one important game is my game. Please pick from the pot of knowledge.
Okay, let me see.
and try and describe the term without using any of the words on the paper. Frederick, you can pitch in if I don't get this right.
Okay. So this is what we would refer to taking materials, making things from them, and then traditionally putting them to waste.
I think I've got that, Frederick. What about you?
I'm sorry, the feed cut a little bit. I missed the first part, sorry.
Snooze, you lose. I reckon that one is linear economy.
That is correct.
10 points for me. Thank you very much. Just a call out to our audience watching at home. You can tell we're having a lot of fun with our many great circular economy games in the studio today. If you've got a question for Frederick or for Katie, then don't forget to send them in. You've got just under 15 minutes left. Coming back to you, Frederick. So you've described your game. It started off as a monopoly type model. You're looking at business models and the application of those business models in a fictional home setting. We heard from Katie that she sees this kind of professional audience as the prime market for In the Loop. What about you? What applications do you see for your game? Are we talking individuals, businesses, schools?
So my game, players play in teams, and the more teams there are, the more discussion you can get going. And as Katie said before, that's a really important thing during these types of sessions. But I limit that at 8, so you would need 8 people, and that works ideally in a workshop. So for now, the game is focused on a workshop setting, for example, at conferences, but also for OEMs, for product manufacturers who are interested in different types of business models. Those would be my target group mostly. But the game is not that difficult that it's not for other groups.
Okay, so like In the Loop, it could have this other audience as well. How can people access the game now? Is it something that anyone can get hold of, or is it for something you're kind of testing and rolling out to smaller groups?
So currently the gameplay itself is done. However, we are currently still developing it towards a game that looks as nice as In the Loop. We would like to make it publicly accessible to anyone for downloading. And I think that will happen at the beginning of the second quarter of 2017, but that's a broad estimate. So for now, unfortunately, I can only show the pictures of it, but it's not publicly available yet.
We do have some questions coming in. So even though neither of these games are directly purchasable right now, they've definitely inspired the audience watching at home. And we've got some good questions coming in. I just wanted to have one final point on kind of this systems aspect. Would it be true to say, and this is a question for both of you really, that games have a bit of a history of conveying some quite complex systems? I am not much of a gamer myself, I'm sorry to say that, but I played a game called Pandemic once, which you're both familiar with, both nodding, and that seems to be quite a sort of complex system that plays out over the course of the game. Can games do something that we couldn't actually get across in another way? Stunned silence.
Yeah, no. Well, they do have the ability to combine lots of different complex items and have them work together. And yeah, they are complex in themselves. I don't know. I think they might be able to do things faster, especially if you have online algorithms and things like that. What do you think, Frederick?
I actually think that games are so. One of the things I've noticed in making a serious game is that a game in itself, it's quite difficult to make a game fun already. There's actually professional game designers who make games that do not have a serious aspect, who already work hard on making games fun. So once you've got that fun factor going, which I've heard from personally, of course, believe is in my game, but also in Kate's game, you get to this nice level where you subconsciously almost pick up certain aspects. Because you're not necessarily thinking, okay, circular economy, I've learned this and I have to apply this, but instead you're in a good game trying to apply tactics, and those tactics you've come up maybe with on the fly, and you're just trying new things, and within that you're finding out new aspects of the circular economy. So I've actually personally learned some new aspects through playing my own game, and players actually commenting on the game and saying, why isn't this included? I don't think you can get that in a movie or a lecture necessarily.
Thank you both. We've got some good questions coming in from the audience with just a few minutes left. If you do have questions for Frederick or Katie, don't forget to send them in. Firstly, from Norbert, has said, it's claimed that gamification has huge potential in the education space. How can we use it to deliver truly meaningful experiences to students? Katie, maybe you want to...
Yes, well, I think there's lots of different ways that you can use gamification, so incorporating different gaming concepts into regular coursework. So for example, we see voting, the ability for students to interact in conversations just during normal lectures, then to having specifically designed games around specific messages. So I think, but to reiterate on something I said earlier, I think that it's really important to think about the message that you're trying to get across, and really design the experience from that, and then to follow up on that to make sure that that experience is actually being received correctly from students. Assessment is something that is a very difficult topic to talk about when relating to games as well, because how you experience something is maybe not the same as how I experience something.
When you say assessment, you mean understanding what people have learned from...
Exactly.
But from some of the points you made earlier, maybe that's part of the experience, that you need to move on to those conversations to kind of discuss the different learning experiences that the players have had.
Exactly, and that's kind of what Frederick has been saying as well, when he's even learning things that have resulted from conversations as a result of his game.
Oh, I think you're. Oh, okay. We've got you back now.
Okay, so I had to add upon that. I think that inside the educational space, you'd like to have a model to interact with these concepts as realistically as possible, and I think a game can do that in the best possible way. So I encourage as many serious games as possible during the educational session.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to Articulate. I'm going to take one more out the pot just to really test this idea. You've really got me thinking with the amount of testing you've done of your game. So I feel it's a great opportunity for me to test my own game before I go through what is almost certainly a failed crowdfunding effort. Right, my turn. Okay, this is the name. Walter Starhull came up with this. It's the name of a. You've got it ready. Go for it.
What is it? Performance economy?
Perfect. We're getting good at this. Performance economy. Walter Starhull. So we're talking about access over ownership here, paying for the performance of a product rather than the product itself. Is that one of the strategies in the loop and in your game, Frederick?
Well, in my game, I actually experimented with offering the performance model also as another aspect, and a funny thing happened. It completely it worked in such a different way than the other models that it just introduced a whole lot of new information. So I, in the end, decided to leave it out. But I think it's such an important concept as well to learn. So I want to actually add it back in future iterations.
Well, that speaks to one of the questions we've had in from the online audience, saying, and this again is for both of you, how would you see these games evolving in 3 to 5 years' time? Are there any achievements that you're eyeing? Frederick, you go first.
So for my game, as soon as it is publicly available, I'm hoping that, let's set a milestone. Let's hope that 100 people at least play it. And I'm hoping to add on more aspects of the circular economy as we learn how to implement it better later on. So right now, this is a good introduction. I'm telling you about access, and I'm showing you a little bit what ownership is like relatively to access. But maybe we figure out later on more aspects of better implementing it. And I would like to add more of those aspects into my game in the future.
So I do have a web shop where I have been distributing the first production run of the game, and I think so far it's been sent to over 20 countries around the world. So I think my goal would be to have it just be sent to even more countries. I'm missing Africa so far, so I have some, and Australia. So those are the two continents that I haven't quite made it to yet. And I think I see lots of different opportunities for, in the gaming world, we'd say expansion packs. So once you have the basic version, you can start to add different layers of complexity, because when you're first starting a game, you don't want to overwhelm people with lots of information. But once they understand how it works, then you can add various layers and start taking it up a couple notches.
So it's maybe even room to go beyond this kind of conversation starter and then enhance the learning experience there.
Exactly.
Well, we're just about reaching the end of the session. So thank you, Frederick and Katie, for joining me today to talk about gaming the circular economy. And if you're just getting into the DIF, or you're just starting week 3 at the Disruptive Innovation Festival, then don't forget about many of the other sessions on the circular economy and other related subjects that you can find over in the schedule, both coming up and in the catch-up section. One tip for you: if circular economy is something that's captured your interest, then make sure to head to the schedule and choose the Circular Economy Essentials topic. There you'll find a number of sessions on the basics of the circular economy model, so you can learn more about this concept without playing one of our fantastic games that we've had demonstrated today. But that's all for today's session at the DIF. Gaming the circular economy, clearly an area that needs more exploration. It might not make you a circular economy mastermind overnight, but it certainly is a good way to start the conversation. We'll see you next time at the DIF. Thank you and goodbye.